Welcome to the special coverage. I'm coming to you live from Evian in the foothills of the French Alps, where, of course, starting later tonight, the world's most powerful leaders, led by US President Donald Trump, the French President Emmanuel Macron, the leaders of Britain, France, Germany, Japan, European Union, will all be converging here for the start of the G7 Leaders Summit. Prime Minister Modi will be here tomorrow. He will be meeting with a host of leaders who are part of the G7. He will also be interacting with President Trump on Wednesday afternoon, France time, here in Evian. This is the first time that both leaders will be meeting face-to-face since February of 2025, when Prime Minister Modi went to the White House. A lot has transpired just in the last 24 hours and certainly in the last week or so. I'm now joined by a very special guest, one of India's foremost strategic and foreign policy analysts, Dr. C. Mohan. Thank you very much, sir, for speaking with us here on Times Now. First things first, we've got this big announcement this morning, both by President Donald Trump as also confirmed by the Iranian side, that both Iran and America have arrived at a peace agreement. That peace agreement will be signed later this week in Switzerland. Just tell us, what do you make of this agreement, this announcement? Many are saying, will it last? Will the Israelis be on board? And the most important thing, it seems like, at least from the contours of this agreement, Iran has got more than what America has got.
Look, I think we yet to see the text of the agreement. The text of the agreement has not been released. For almost a month, it's been, here it is not. One more step to be taken, a little more text to be changed. So it's been a fairly uncertain, a difficult negotiation, I would say, between the two sides. And the fact that they've not released the text shows the sensitivity. There's been speculation that even in the last minute, after the Israeli attack on Lebanon, the text had to be changed. So I would say it's a good step. The markets are reacting very well. But the proof of the pudding would be actually to seeing the text in the next few days. And then when we have the text, the implementation now, if they've quarreled so much on drafting the text, you can take it for granted they're going to start arguing about what the text means when it comes to implementation. That doesn't mean the agreement is useless, and I think its effect on the global markets, the relief for most of the world is very, very palpable. But I think the real hard stuff lies ahead, because the agreement is about a framework to negotiate. What happens now is the opening of the Strait of the Hormuz. And after that, all the other difficult issues, whether it's a nuclear file or sanctions relief, all those will follow later. And I think the real stuff will be negotiated in the 60 days after the agreement starts getting implemented on Friday.
So one of the concerns already is that some sections in the Israeli government, we've seen, some of the far-right coalition ministers who are partners of Bibi Netanyahu's government, have said that there's no way they will agree to this deal. We have seen this in the past as well, in the last 4 to 6 weeks. Every time there is the possibility of a ceasefire or a peace agreement, Israel goes and attacks Lebanon. Do you think Israel will keep its end of the bargain here?
No, I think Israel is not the only country that is divided on this issue. So is Iran. In fact, in the last few days, there have been some protests by hardliners against the agreement. The government is being accused of being sold out to the Americans. There were even slogans like "Death to Arabchi," etc. So I think, given the sensitivity of the negotiation, half the challenge in any such situation is the internal negotiation. Given what was being demanded of the external partners, the internal negotiation is always harder. And I think we're going to see significant differences come out into the open. Israel, it's already clear. In Iran too. And then in the US, of course, there's a lot of people who are opposed to Trump saying, look, we told you this guy's crazy. He's sold out. On the right wing, the liberals are happy. Say, what have we got? Obama did it in 2015. So I think those political arguments will continue. But the fact is, we have a piece of paper. We haven't seen the paper yet. But I think a lot would depend on what happens from now on, while the arguments in all the three countries, internal arguments, will be quite severe.
So, at the end of this 3 months, it's been 108 days of war, and hopefully, no one wants this war to continue, including India. Everybody has called for a cessation of hostilities. At the end of these 3 months, Who has achieved what? Primarily Iran and America. And who has lost what?
Look, I mean, I'm against really viewing this as a T20 match. There has been a lot of bombastic setting of goals by Trump. There's a lot of bravado in Iran, how they triumphed over US. Look, I think both sides have serious issues. I think Trump, whatever the situation is, the fact that the Hormuz Strait was open before the war, and now he had to face a situation where to reopen the Hormuz Strait, he had to make some concessions to Iran. On the other hand, it's not as if Iran won. I mean, I don't know what it means, winning. Iran's economy has been battered by the war. It's under sanctions for so long. So for anyone who is interested in rebuilding Iran as their section of the thing, for them, they need the relief. They need engagement with the world. They need the lifting of sanctions. They need the oil revenues to flow. So I would say it's the real battles in that sense would begin now. For now, I think for both, it's a convenient ceasefire. It gives the time for both of them to regroup, to come back. And I think as we look for winners and losers, we should never underestimate the fact, the relative strengths of Iran and the US. Iran has had some leverages in the Strait of Hormuz. But there any future modernization, a lot would depend on what the US does. So it's not as if the match is over, somebody has scored the points, and it's a victory for one side or the other.
I want to talk about India because obviously India has faced the down-the-line consequences of this war. One, economically, because of the pressure on fuel prices. The government has had to increase fuel prices 4 times in the last month, and that is unpopular for any democratic government. And 2, on the political side as well. Just in the last 1 week, we have seen the deaths of these 3 Indian sailors. The popular feeling seems to be that Mr. Modi's government has not responded emphatically enough or strongly enough or conveyed the sense of outrage that's there out in the Indian public to the killing of these Indian sailors by US Navy fire.
Look, I think for India, the immediate question is, look, the oil prices have started falling. It's a big relief for India. Today, Indian stock market was up, but the last time I checked, by 1.5%. It's a huge gain by the stock markets for India, for the Indian middle class. Look, I think the rest of it, what you talked about, the outrage. Look, our sailors are, for good or bad, I mean, they're everywhere. And once they're caught in the war zone, that you can express all the outrage you want. But the fact is that it was a war zone. And I think the crossfire in which the Indian sailors were caught is unfortunate. Today, I see that the government has finally issued some advisory of how to deal with the situation. So I think to hype this up as some kind of a dramatic breakdown in India-US relations, I think would be unwise, because we see that every 2 months we have a crisis, but the trade is going up even without a trade deal. So I would say, look, I think there's always the social media warriors in India with outraged every day with something or the other. So I wouldn't pay serious attention to it. But the fact is, even without what's happened with these 3, with the killings, our relationship has entered a difficult phase. Yeah. In terms of political differences on several issues. And I think the meeting that you're talking about on Wednesday, if that helps, restore to some extent, partly we saw that when Secretary Rubio was here, that look, it is our biggest relationship. That we have, trade of nearly $250 billion. The US is still the quarter of the global economy. Yesterday I was seeing the facts. We're talking about France, the India-France trade, $16 billion is going to be doubled. But that's the trade we do with the US every month.
Billion, yeah.
So I think we should not forget the scale of this relationship, the gravity of this relationship. But there are issues at hand. The hunky-dory stuff is gone. And I think the US is in a very crazy mood, if you will. It's acting unilaterally. Forget us. The kind of things Trump says about Israel. Crazy what all the terms, abuses he has used against Netanyahu, the closest US ally. Yeah. He doesn't much care for the Europeans. So I think we got to recognize there is a complex moment in the US. A leader who's willing to be unilateral. So therefore, we need to protect our interests. And rhetoric and Twitter warriors are not going to save this relationship. But I think the government has been responsible to engage and deal with the reality of differences while protecting India's interests.
So I want to talk about that meeting. I mean, it's the first time that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump will be meeting on Wednesday in over a year. The last time they met face-to-face was in February 2025, right after Trump got elected again and Prime Minister went to the White House. And ever since, a lot of water has flown down the Ganga as well as the Potomac, if you will. The trade issue is still very much front and center. We still haven't got an interim trade agreement going. We're not sure how closer we are to that just yet. There's issue around this whole sanctions for buying Russian oil. India says we are free to buy oil from whoever we want to. Then there is also this repeated, almost ad nauseum claims that Trump has been making about he was the reason why India and Pakistan got into a ceasefire, so on and so forth. As you said, it's not in the pink of health. How does India address some of these sticking points when that meeting happens?
No, I would say to the credit of Delhi, I think the government has been patient in negotiating the major issues. When just a few days ago, when the U.S. trade delegation was in Delhi, it was said now 99% of the negotiation has been complete. There's only 1% left. And of course, these things are not going to be signed in the meeting between Trump and Modi. But I think progress is being made. Meanwhile, trade itself has grown. The volumes have grown despite all the uncertainty. But the two sides would want a stable, predictable framework of the interim trade deal through which trade can be further expanded. On the question of Russian oil, U.S. itself has lifted sanctions on Russian oil. India has been buying more oil from the United States. And so I would say if there is peace in the Gulf, some of our crisis itself would be less threatening if we can get there.
Okay. So Dr. Rajamohan, I'll finally end by asking you this. So, like I said, the G7 is arguably the most powerful grouping of world leaders. The leaders of America, Britain, France, Germany, Japan, they're all going to be here. And the Prime Minister, of course, this is the 7th time, I believe, he's attending the G7. And it comes at a time when, I'm just giving you the layman's view, is that America and China seem to have cut a deal. There is no longer this great power rivalry between Beijing and Washington. I think the term that they agreed upon when Trump was in Beijing last month was constructive strategic stability. What does that mean for a country like India? I mean, even the Quad, many are now saying, is in a very diluted form and fashion.
Look, I think, as you mentioned, this is not the first time Prime Minister Modi is attending. Since 2003 for a few times, and then in the last 8-9 years, more consistently being present. I think what it reflects is the dramatic transformation of the Indian economy after the 1990s reforms, where today the West is our main partner. In the Cold War, Russia was our main economic partner. Today, India's trade flows, people's flows, students, everything goes to West. So West has become the biggest partner. The second issue, I think, what's happened within the West today, the West is divided. I mean, I think the G7 is divided. You are right there, and you will see Macron will take a big, will be relieved if Trump goes without creating an incident. At the Canada summit last year, Trump walked out halfway through the G7 meeting. So it's like a family gathering where the unpredictable uncle, if he doesn't create a problem, then we're all happy that the thing went very well. But the West is divided. So in a sense, India is diversifying relationship within the West. Same with Canada, has had problems with the US, is trying to build relationship with Europe. So there's some internal diversification. On the China question, look, I don't think the US and China have cut a deal. They're trying to cut a deal. China is doing hard bargaining. The US is trying to find some relief in terms of the difficulties that they've had with the Chinese. So this is nowhere near a stable relationship. So the search for constructive stability is an aspiration at this point, not a reality. But the fact is, look, we also sit with the Chinese, right? We sit with the Chinese in the BRICS. We had a Chinese attack on our territory, but we rarely mention even Chinese name when it comes to what happened in Galwan. So it's not as if Americans are betraying everybody and making up with the Chinese. China is the biggest, second largest economy. They control 35% of the world's manufacturing. They got monopoly on entire structure of renewable energy, on rare earths. So everybody has to deal with them. Now the question is how each one deals with it. My own view is we have to live with China, but we have a huge number of problems with China. We need more cooperation with the US to be able to deal with the China challenge. That too. So both are realities. And the question is, when you have an unpredictable president, the task becomes harder. And India's challenge, therefore, is how does it go through this without creating another crisis with China, but preserving the relationships we had with the US over the last 20 years. Meanwhile, diversify. I think what we saw yesterday with the French leader Macron is that, look, India and France are going to do more with each other. India and Europe are already doing more with each other. So I think that is a strategy, if you want to call it multi-alignment. Please do. But I think the world is passing through a difficult moment. The predictability of post-90 world doesn't exist. And I think the challenge for India is to navigate it without being jumpy, without being panicking, without being, worried all the time and wringing your hands. My sense is you've got to play the game confidently.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for this fascinating conversation, Dr. C. Mohan, one of India's foremost foreign policy and strategic affairs analysts. Thank you for joining us on Times Now. With that, we'll take a break here on the program, but news and updates, special interviews, full focus over the next 4 or 5 days here at Evian in northern France, where later tonight, the leaders of the world, the leaders of the G7 will be meeting for the official dinner. That's when the G7 will kick off. Prime Minister Modi will arrive here tomorrow, and he will have a series of bilateral meetings, including the big one that's coming up on Wednesday between Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump. Quick break, news and updates right on the other side.